Close your mouth for a moment and let a soft sound form behind your lips. Not a song, not a word, just a gentle hum held lightly on one breath. At first it seems almost too simple to matter, a small vibration, a private sound, something you might do without thinking while waiting, walking, cooking, or trying to fall asleep. But if you pay attention, the sound does not stay where it begins. It spreads. It touches the lips first, then the nose. It moves into the cheeks, settles around the upper jaw, and flickers behind the eyes. Somewhere near the forehead, a faint pressure appears. Not painful, not forced, but present. Deeper still, the skull seems to become aware of itself. The sound is no longer only something you hear. It is something you inhabit. For 60 seconds, this quiet vibration turns the head into an instrument. Air moves. Bone carries sound. Hidden chambers behind the face begin to respond. The breath slows without being commanded. Nerves near the throat receive a steady mechanical signal. Even the lungs may be touched indirectly by molecules released higher up in the nasal passages. This does not mean humming is a cure or a treatment or a replacement for medical care. Its effects are mild, human, and context-dependent. But mild does not mean meaningless. Sometimes the smallest actions reveal the most elegant machinery. And with one closed mouth, one steady tone, and one slow exhale, a hidden biological sequence has already begun. The strange thing about humming is that you are not only hearing it through the air, you are hearing it through yourself. When most sounds reach you, they arrive from the outside. They travel across space, enter the ear canal, vibrate the eardrum, and are translated into signals the brain can understand. But your own hum takes another route. It begins inside the throat, and from there, part of the vibration moves through tissue, cartilage, teeth, jaw, and bone. This is why your voice sounds different in your own head than it does on a recording. A microphone hears mostly the air version of your voice. You hear both the air version and the bone version. During humming, that internal pathway becomes especially noticeable because the mouth is closed and the sound is concentrated inside the head. The skull is not a silent helmet around the brain. It is a living structure capable of carrying mechanical vibration. The jaw, cheekbones, nasal bones, and temporal bones all become part of the signal path. The vibration can reach the inner ear through bone conduction, giving the hum a deeper, fuller quality than outside listeners perceive. What feels like a simple sound is actually a private acoustic event occurring within the architecture of your own face. This is part of what makes humming so intimate. You are not listening to the world. You are listening to your body from inside its frame. And once the skull begins to vibrate, the sound reaches places that ordinary speech rarely holds long enough to awaken. Behind the face, hidden inside the bones of the skull, are spaces most people only think about when something goes wrong. The sinuses. They are remembered during congestion, pressure, infection, and headaches. But in ordinary life, they are almost invisible to attention. They sit behind the cheeks, above the eyes, between the eyes, and deeper toward the center of the skull, quietly connected to the nasal airway through small openings. These paranasal sinuses are not solid bone. They are air-filled chambers lined with delicate mucous membrane. Their shapes vary from person to person. Their sizes change with anatomy. Their openings are narrow and their walls are thin enough to respond to vibration. When you hum, these chambers may behave less like empty spaces and more like small resonant rooms inside the face. A room changes sound. A bottle changes sound. A flute changes sound. The shape of an airspace influences how vibration behaves inside it. The sinuses are not musical instruments in the poetic sense, but they do have the physical ingredients of resonance, enclosed air, bony boundaries, and openings into a larger airway. When a steady vibration passes through the skull and nasal region, these spaces can begin to oscillate. That may be why the hum feels strongest behind the cheeks, nose, and forehead. The sensation is not random. It follows the geography of the skull. A hidden map lights up, not with electricity but with vibration. And the longer the sound is held, the more the face seems to answer back. Humming is not the same as speaking. It is not even the same as singing. Speech is restless. It breaks into consonants, vowels, pauses, changes in pitch, changes in pressure, and tiny movements of the tongue, lips, and jaw. Speech carries meaning, but acoustically, it is constantly shifting. The body receives it as a pattern of interruptions. Singing can sustain sound more beautifully, but it often moves through notes, words, volume changes, and emotional phrasing. It can be powerful, but it is usually complex. Humming is different because it strips the voice down to something almost primitive. The mouth closes. The tone narrows. The vibration is held. The air does not leave through open speech. It is guided into the nasal passages and facial structures. This steadiness matters. Resonance likes continuity. A bell does not fully bloom if it is tapped and stopped in the same instant. A glass does not sing if the pressure disappears too quickly. In the same way, the body's small air-filled spaces may respond more strongly to a sustained tone than to ordinary conversation. Humming gives the cavities time to participate. There is no need to force the note. In fact, strain may make the experience worse. A relaxed, comfortable hum often feels more effective because the body is not fighting the sound. It is allowing it. The throat vibrates, the face receives, the skull carries, and the breath lengthens. What begins as a tone becomes a whole body rhythm, and one of the most interesting changes happens in a gas you cannot see. Inside the nasal passages and sinuses, the body produces a small but important molecule called nitric oxide. It is not the same as nitrous oxide, the anesthetic gas sometimes used in medicine. Nitric oxide is a signaling molecule made naturally in the body, and it has many roles. It helps blood vessels relax. It participates in airway biology. It influences the local environment inside the nose and sinuses. In the nasal region, nitric oxide is produced by the lining of the airway and the sinus cavities. During quiet nasal breathing, some of it mixes with the air you inhale. It does not arrive as a dramatic dose. It is subtle, continuous, and local. But biology often works through subtle signals. A small molecule in the right place can change how tissues behave. Nitric oxide also has relevance inside the sinuses themselves. It is part of the chemical environment of these air spaces, and researchers have studied its relationship to sinus ventilation, microbes, airway function, and inflammation. But it is important to be careful. Humming is not a medical treatment for sinus disease. It should not be presented as a cure for infection, breathing disorders, or any condition requiring professional care. The effect is physiological, not magical. What makes humming fascinating is that it may change how nitric oxide-rich air moves. The molecule is already being produced. The spaces are already connected to the nose. The missing piece is motion, and a steady hum may provide that motion in a surprisingly mechanical way. Imagine the sinuses as quiet rooms connected to the nasal airway by narrow doors. During normal breathing, air moves mostly through the nose, while the sinuses exchange gas more slowly through their small openings. Nitric oxide produced inside those chambers can accumulate and diffuse outward, but diffusion is gentle and limited. It is not a strong current. It is more like scent leaving a closed room through a cracked doorway. Humming changes the pressure pattern. The vibration creates rapid acoustic oscillations in the nasal and sinus region. Instead of relying only on slow diffusion, the air in these small chambers may be pulsed back and forth more actively. This is why some scientists describe humming as increasing sinus ventilation. In simple language, the hum may act like an acoustic pump. The word pump should not be misunderstood. Nothing forceful is happening. The sinuses are not being squeezed like balloons. The effect is tiny, rhythmic, and produced by sound pressure. But because the openings between the sinuses and nasal airway are narrow, even small oscillations may increase the exchange of gases between these spaces. This is one of the better supported areas of humming research. Nasal nitric oxide levels can rise markedly during humming compared with quiet exhalation. The exact amount can vary with anatomy, technique, measurement, and nasal health. but the direction is clear enough to be taken seriously. A hum can move air differently, and once nitric oxide-rich air reaches the nasal passage, it does not stay in the head. With the next nasal inhale, the pathway continues downward, into the lungs. Follow the breath after the hum. Air enters through the nose, carrying with it traces of molecules from the nasal passages and sinuses. It moves past the throat, down the trachea, through branching airways, and finally into the delicate sacs of the lungs. Here the body performs one of its quiet miracles. Oxygen crosses into the blood, carbon dioxide leaves, and every cell waits for the result. Nitric oxide in the airways is interesting because it can influence blood vessel tone. In the lungs, blood vessels must constantly adjust to match airflow and blood flow. When vessels relax slightly, more blood can move through certain regions, and gas exchange may become more efficient in a local, modest way. This is not the same as receiving oxygen therapy. It is not a replacement for inhalers, respiratory support, medication, or medical nitric oxide used in hospitals. The scale is completely different. But mild does not mean imaginary. The body is built from gradients, signals, and small adjustments. Nasal breathing already changes the character of inhaled air by warming, filtering, humidifying, and chemically shaping it. Humming may briefly enrich that nasal air with more nitric oxide than quiet breathing alone. For a healthy person, this may contribute to a subtle feeling of easier breathing, clarity, or internal openness. For someone with medical conditions, the interpretation must be more cautious, and professional guidance matters. Still, the pathway is elegant. A sound in the throat may influence gas movement in the face, which may influence the air entering the lungs. The hum is not only heard, it is transported. There is another pathway, and it does not begin in the sinuses. It begins near the voice box, where the hum is born. The vocal folds vibrate as air passes through them. Around this region runs one of the most important communication lines in the body, the vagus nerve. It travels from the brainstem through the neck and into the chest and abdomen, carrying information between the brain, heart, lungs, digestive organs, and more. The vagus nerve is often discussed as if it were a relaxation button, but that is too simple. It is not a button. It is a vast biological cable, involved in sensing, regulating, and coordinating internal state. It helps the brain listen to the body. It participates in heart rate regulation, breathing patterns, digestion, and the shift between alertness and restoration. Because branches of the vagus nerve pass near the larynx, humming may influence this region mechanically. The vibration of the vocal folds and nearby tissues could provide a gentle, repeated stimulus to nerves in the throat and voice box area. This does not mean humming is the same as medical vagus nerve stimulation. It is not. Medical devices deliver controlled electrical stimulation for specific conditions under professional supervision. A hum is softer, less precise, and far more ordinary. But ordinary physiology can still matter. A steady vibration near a sensitive communication pathway may be one reason humming feels regulating. The nerve-rich throat receives the rhythm. The breath carries it. The brain listens. And while the vibration continues, another calming mechanism is quietly being built into the exhale itself. You cannot hum on the inhale. The sound requires air to move outward through the vocal folds. This simple fact changes everything. Humming naturally turns breathing into an exhale-dominant pattern. You inhale briefly, then release the breath slowly as sound. Without counting, without training, without following a technique, the out-breath becomes longer than the in-breath. A long exhale has a different effect on the nervous system than a rushed one. In many breathing practices, people are taught to extend the exhalation because it tends to support parasympathetic activity, the branch of the autonomic nervous system associated with recovery, digestion, settling, and conservation of energy. But many people struggle with formal breathing exercises. Counting can feel unnatural. Holding the breath can feel tense. Trying to relax can become another task. Humming bypasses some of that effort. The sound gives the exhale a shape. It slows the breath because the tone needs air to continue. It steadies the release because a broken exhale breaks the hum. The body finds a rhythm not through instruction, but through sound. This is one reason a minute of humming can feel different from a minute of simply sitting quietly. The breath has been organized. The exhale has been lengthened. The throat has vibrated. The face has resonated. The attention has been anchored to an internal sensation. None of these effects need to be dramatic to be real. The nervous system often changes by degrees, and sometimes one longer breath becomes the doorway to a quieter internal state. Calm is often described as a mental achievement, as if the mind must persuade the body to settle. But humming suggests a different order. The body can send signals upward first. The extended exhale changes respiratory rhythm. The vibration touches the throat and face. The sound narrows attention. The heart may respond subtly. The shoulders may drop before the mind has explained why. This is physiology, not belief. A person does not have to imagine the vagus nerve. They do not have to visualize nitric oxide. They do not have to understand resonance. The mechanisms, where they occur, operate below language. The hum creates conditions that the body can interpret as slower, safer, more stable. During stress, breathing often becomes shallow or irregular. The jaw tightens. The throat closes slightly. Attention fragments. A gentle hum reverses some of that pattern. The mouth closes in a soft way. The exhale becomes audible and extended. The vibration gives the brain a predictable internal signal. The sound is not demanding. It is repetitive, simple, and contained. This may help explain why humming appears in lullabies, prayer, meditation, chanting, and ordinary self-soothing across cultures. Long before modern physiology named the pathways, people noticed the effect. They may not have known about autonomic balance, nasal nitric oxide, bone conduction, or laryngeal nerves, but they knew that a low sustained sound could change the atmosphere inside the body. Still, the effect is not guaranteed, and it is not a substitute for mental health care or medical support. It is a small physiological lever, but small levers, used gently, can move surprisingly deep systems. The hum also reaches the inner ear in a way outside sound does not. Because vibration travels through bone, the cochlea receives part of the signal directly through the skull. This is bone conduction, and it gives your own hum its unusual depth. To another person, your hum may sound quiet and ordinary. To you, it can feel wide, internal, almost surrounding. Near the cochlea are the vestibular organs, the structures that help the brain sense balance, motion, and orientation. They are exquisitely sensitive to movement. It is plausible that steady bone-conducted vibration may provide them with a predictable internal input. Some people describe humming as grounding, centering, or stabilizing. They feel less scattered, more present in the body, as though the nervous system has been given a single point of reference. But this part requires caution. The subjective feeling is real to the person experiencing it, but the exact vestibular contribution is not fully established. The inner ear is anatomically close to the pathways of bone-conducted sound, yet translating that anatomy into a specific emotional effect is difficult. Groundedness may come from many sources at once: slower breathing, attention to vibration, vagal pathways, reduced muscular tension, sound masking, or expectation. The important point is not to overclaim. Humming may influence inner ear structures through bone conduction, and that may contribute to the way it feels. But the body rarely gives us one clean mechanism. It layers signals. Breath, sound, pressure, vibration, attention, and memory converge. The hum becomes a whole-body perception. And deeper than perception lies an even more speculative question. Could these pressure rhythms affect the fluid around the brain? Beyond the better-studied pathways, there is a more mysterious layer. It concerns pressure, fluid, and the brain's internal environment. The brain is surrounded by cerebrospinal fluid, a clear liquid that cushions neural tissue and participates in waste movement. This fluid is not still. It shifts with heartbeat, breathing, posture, pressure changes, and sleep. Because humming extends the exhale and creates gentle resistance in the upper airway, it may produce small changes in pressure within the chest and head. Those pressure waves could, in theory, influence cerebrospinal fluid movement. Some researchers study how respiration affects fluid motion around the brain, and others investigate the glymphatic system, a proposed waste clearance pathway that becomes especially active during sleep. This is where the story must slow down. It would be tempting to claim that humming cleans the brain, flushes toxins, or boosts glymphatic clearance. That would go too far. The connection is plausible in a broad mechanical sense, but it is not settled. A 60-second hum has not been proven to meaningfully enhance brain waste clearance. The physics of breath pressure and fluid movement is real, but the health implications remain under investigation. Still, the possibility is intriguing. Humming may create rhythmic pressure changes. Breath can influence fluid dynamics. Sleep and nervous system state matter for brain clearance. These ideas touch one another, but touching is not proof. The responsible conclusion is this. Humming may participate in a larger rhythm of pressure, breath, and fluid movement, but the strongest evidence still belongs elsewhere. The mystery is not closed. It is simply not ready to be sold as certainty. To understand humming honestly, the evidence must be separated into layers. Some parts are strongly supported. Others are reasonable but incomplete. Others remain speculative. This distinction is what keeps wonder from becoming exaggeration. The stronger evidence begins with nasal nitric oxide. Humming can increase nitric oxide measured in nasal air compared with quiet breathing, likely because vibration improves gas exchange between the sinuses and nasal passages. The exact response depends on the person, the nasal airway, the pitch, the intensity, and the method of measurement, but the basic phenomenon is well established enough to discuss with confidence. The breathing effect is also straightforward. Humming happens on the exhale, so it naturally lengthens the outbreath. Longer exhalation is associated with parasympathetic influence and changes in autonomic balance. This does not require mystical language. It is built into respiratory physiology. The vagus nerve connection is plausible and partly supported by what is known about laryngeal anatomy, vocalization, breathing, and autonomic regulation. But the precise amount of vagal stimulation produced by a casual hum can vary, and it should not be equated with clinical nerve stimulation. The more cautious territory includes claims about the inner ear, groundedness, intracranial pressure, cerebrospinal fluid movement, and glymphatic clearance. These ideas may fit with anatomy and physics, but they are not fully proven outcomes of humming for 60 seconds. This does not make humming less interesting. It makes it more interesting. A simple act can contain both confirmed mechanisms and unanswered questions. The science is not diminished by caution. It becomes more trustworthy. And when the unknown is named clearly, the ordinary hum becomes not a miracle, but a doorway into how complex the body really is. A 60-second hum is small enough to dismiss. It requires no equipment, no special room, no app, no instruction, no belief. Close the mouth. Choose a comfortable note. Let the breath leave slowly. That is all. And yet, inside that simplicity, several systems meet. The skull carries vibration through bone. The sinuses respond as air-filled chambers behind the face. Nitric oxide in the nasal region may be moved more actively into the airway. The next breath may carry that chemistry toward the lungs. The larynx vibrates near important nerve pathways. The exhale lengthens naturally. The nervous system receives signals of rhythm, pressure, sound, and internal steadiness. The inner ear may hear the body from within. The mind, given one continuous sensation, may stop reaching in so many directions at once. None of this makes humming a medical treatment. It does not cure disease. It does not replace medication, oxygen therapy, respiratory care, therapy, sleep treatment, or professional medical guidance. Anyone with serious respiratory, cardiovascular, neurological, or other medical conditions should follow the advice of qualified professionals. The effects of humming are mild, physiological, and context-dependent. But mild practices can still be meaningful, especially before sleep, especially during a stressful moment, especially when the body feels scattered and the mind cannot be argued into calm. A hum is not an escape from biology. It is biology speaking in vibration. One breath, one tone, 1 minute. And beneath the quiet sound, the body remembers that it is not just flesh and thought, but resonance, rhythm, air, nerve, blood, and bone.